You wrote really interesting personas there, with nice hair and nice eyes. Okay, so next, here's a few other practices you can do on this round. So this round is about analysis, right? You analyze who the users are. Here are some practices you can look into: journey mapping, persona workshops. What you did is somehow a persona workshop, whiteboarding the flow, and then lo-fi wireframing of the solution. So bottom line, at this point, you want to visualize what the problem is, or what the user, or who the user is, or what you're trying to do. What's the motivation? Now we're going to go to the design phase, and this is where you will start mind mapping. So what I need you to do is to get one sheet of paper, one per person. So you have the A4s there, right? So get one for each. For this round, what we're going to do is to brainstorm test ideas individually and generate a lot of test ideas. A lot of you think that only software testers could potentially have that, very various mindset of what to test. But I'd like you to think that you have a lot more to offer as well. You have a different perspective. Developers has a different perspective. Product, UX has a different perspective. Even project managers have a different perspective to things. So generate a lot of ideas, and then I'll give you some inspiration by flashing a test heuristic later on. And that's something that would help a lot your teams in terms of understanding what could be tested. And then, again, we're going to be visualizing your thinking using the mind maps. So in 5 minutes, I need you to create your own mind map of the Facebook's functionality, platform, data, or whatever it is that you think needs to be tested within that Facebook status box. And then you can use the heuristic test strategy model, which is this one. What it does is that it gives you some ideas on what you can test. You can test the interface, the operations, your personas, how they use it. You can test the platform itself, or where it's going to be installed, what's the OS. Is there a time element to it? Structure is usually for your components or code, so if you can imagine where it would connect, like a location-based service, or a CDN in Timbuktu, I don't know. And then you can also use data, for example. So this is an inspiration for you to think about, okay, so I have the Facebook status box. What can I test in here? All right? And we're going to do that in the next 5 minutes as well. Do you have any questions? This is Facebook status box. Yeah.
Can you go to the status box picture?
Yeah, I'll flash that in a bit. So for those of you who don't have Facebook on your phone, we can use this bit. Okay? All good? Alright, I'm gonna walk around as well and give you like a time for 5 minutes again, and we'll start with the next exercise. Alright, we'll begin. So mind map individually. Write down in the middle, Facebook status box, and then branch out with your test ideas. Don't worry about format for now. Alright guys, I only have one screen. I also need to flash the heuristics. Is it okay?
Yeah.
Okay. Take a photo in your head. Alright, here's the heuristic. Alright. Alright, so the time box is up. Finished or not finished? We're finished. Okay, so here's what other practices you can do on this part, on the design part. You can do post-its as well on the wall individually. And then you can also use other heuristics. For example, I wasn't able to print out the handout, but RC. Remember you have like a big regression test that you need to run. Sometimes you can just pick whichever test you need to run by using the RC heuristic. It's about what's the critical one, what's the riskiest one. It's an acronym for something. I'll put the link on the slide share as well so you can check. So now we're going to jump onto the agree phase. And this is where you start discussing things. What you did earlier was to diverge your ideas, right? You have individual maps. Now we're going to converge that and agree on what our group map is all about. So with agree, you need to entertain all ideas of your teammates. Don't shut them down. Smile and have a discussion. And then just put everything on a group map. You'll later on decide which one you're going to implement as tests. But what I need you to do is to, on this phase as well, if you can get VIP stakeholders, of course we don't have that now, into the room, and then also give them like opportunity to provide inputs on what the test is going to be or the risks are going to be. But for this exercise, what we're going to do is to create a team map on the next 10 minutes using your manila paper. You have the yellow manila papers there. And it's literally from Manila, so I need you to share your own individual maps with your group first, and then come up with a group map combining all your ideas into one single map. So again, have a discussion of your individual maps, share it with others. So after everyone has taken their turns, come up with a group map within the next 10 minutes. Any questions so far? You're going to do a mind map as well on the group map. Okay? 10 minutes starts now. I'll roam around again if you have any questions. So the next one we're going to do is a risk map. I'll load the slides on full screen in a bit. So what you have are mind maps. You can still continue that if you want to in a bit, if you want to expand that. But this time, in the next 5 minutes, what I need you to do is to get your post-its. You know what, I'll give you maybe 7 minutes so others could still finish adding some more items in their maps. So I'll give you 7 minutes, and then I'd like you to write down on your post-its what risks are you thinking that could potentially happen. What are the risks? What are the potential critical issues that could happen? What's the worst that could happen on that Facebook status box? And then, for example, location-based service, check-in. So one potential risk there is you're getting the wrong data or you're not finding the wrong location. In terms of posting in the status box, maybe the risk there is it's going to be posted on another person's wall. Unfortunately. So you can imagine anything that you perceive is going to be a risk for the Facebook status box. You can also consider that with your persona. We're going to be using the persona much more in a bit. But you can use your persona to think how that could potentially be problematic for your persona. So for example, if you wrote down your persona is your grandma, maybe he won't be able to post quickly and the text will disappear. It's up to you. So come up with the risk that you perceive could potentially happen. Questions? Yeah?
So we by each PowerPoint here.
You don't have to, well, you can do it that way, but what we just need to do is to get post-its, write down what are the potential critical issues. So imagine you're raising an issue later on that's quite critical, and then you can put that on the post-it. Or think about what's the worst that could happen on each of those elements, and then write them on post-its. Yeah? You can still write it down. Just write down all of this. Yeah? You can focus on, yes, you can consider the persona or you can choose not to. I would encourage you to look at the persona because later on we're going to be using the persona anyway. But for now, you can either focus on just imagine risk or using the risk perspective from the persona that you have. Either way would work. It's up to you. Yep. No, not necessarily. You don't have to put in calculations for the risks. Yep. One risk, one post-it. All right, we'll start in 7 minutes, guys. And stick that to your mind maps. So some other things you can do here in terms of, for example, I would assume you guys have a lot of ideas on what the risk or what the features that you're going to be testing. Other practices you can use here is to do heat maps or dot voting. Are you guys doing retrospectives? Yeah. So you know what dot voting is, right? You mark which one you think is the highest priority with the number of votes. You can do that here, but we're not going to be doing that now. And then you can play the nightmare headline game. So the nightmare headline game is something that I usually work with the CEO or the product manager by asking him, okay, so this release, what is your worst nightmare? If you wake up tomorrow morning and you get an email saying there's a big issue, what could it look like? And that simple question usually generates a lot of insights from someone who's higher up in the organization to say, this is what I'm afraid of. I think we need to make sure we test this out and make sure it doesn't happen. So that's one way you can generate what the priority test is going to be. And then you can do issue mining. So I suppose if you're working for an IT company, you have support, app support, tech support, where they report the bugs from, I don't know, Gojek or your Genius product. And what you can do there is look at that issue list and then look at the patterns. So what's usually failing? Is it about connection? Is it usually about location service? Or is it usually about the user interface that's confusing? You can use that to prioritize what test you're going to be running. I'm going to show you something. So, and this is the importance of asking those questions with the CEO. This is a website for a hotel that we are building in Australia. And you know the model? No? Charlize Theron? She's a Hollywood actress, so she's popular. She was in Hancock and other movies in Hollywood. So we created this website and asked her to be the model, put her picture in there, and then tested the website, and the website worked perfectly. But when we started asking the chief marketing officer, okay, so here's the website, are you okay with this? What's the worst that could happen? And you know what he went back with? It was not about the UI, it was not about the links, it was not about whether it works in mobile or in web. The biggest risk here, can anyone guess? What's the worst that could happen with this website? Sorry?
Picture.
Picture? What's with the picture?
I see the hotel without the glasses, so it's not. It's kind of unfinished hotel.
It's kind of unfinished hotel. That's a valid one. Although not really. It's not. But you're close. You're close. But it wasn't the main answer. Yep.
Content.
The content. What's with the content? Not clear enough? Not clear enough? It wasn't what they said. Yeah? Last guess.
Maybe overlay image. I want to reflect the raw image is completely the bottom overlay.
So it's not clear for them?
Yeah.
That's close. It's probably one of the main concerns. But you know what the most critical issue for them was?
It's not protection of
That's one thing. It's their photo anyway. They took it. They signed off on the image. The biggest risk with this is the text running over Charlize Theron's face. It was kind of trivial. So if when he looked at this in the smaller screen, Melbourne, the M is actually in her nose. And the problem there is, contractually speaking, we are going to be litigated, liable, if text run through her face. It's part of the contract. And we don't know about it. It's only legal and the CMO who are able to tell us that it's the biggest problem. And when we started testing it in different devices, all the letters run over her face. So we had to go overnight just to fix that problem. Because otherwise, once we release that, and Charlize knows that it's released and she sees it, we are subject to litigation. And it's funny, because it's a simple freaking website, right? It's just a website, but then your face can't be covered. So those kinds of questions generate a lot of insights if you ask them with your stakeholders. Very, very important. So we're going to go back to the activity. We're going to be on a plan phase. So this is the second to the last activity, but this will be the last activity for today because the last one is a bit long, so we won't go through with that. This is usually a workshop I run for 4 hours with different Agile teams. So imagine I try to compress that within an hour and a half. So the plan phase is for you guys to consider what you will be testing. And this is where I said earlier, you're going to be using your scenarios again to come up with test charters. So the test charter, if you're familiar with test cases, the one you use to run the test, this time you're not going to write down the big test case chunk. You're not going to write down a lot of expected results and steps to do that. What you're going to do is to come up with a simple template of test idea, as lean as possible. And then on this phase, usually we relatively size each test charter, but we're not going to do that today. At this phase as well, you will be prepping the logistics of your test and then ruthlessly prioritizing the charters. But the activity we're going to be doing is for you guys to just write down test charters. We're just going to give you 5 minutes so we can have a lot more time on questions. Yeah, we will. So a test charter is combining the test charter will do is combining your persona with the risk and with the functionalities that we have there. So you can just try to attach, and see what makes sense. So if your persona is, again, the old grandma, and then your functionality is to post, a message, and then your functionality, your biggest risk is that it doesn't get posted on time, or maybe you're not in a location where there's signal. Your test charter, how it would look like is explore posting using grandma in an area where there's no signal. And then using the Facebook status box, but discover issues where it actually just won't post anything at all. So what we're trying to do here is to come up with small chunks of test ideas that we can put on a template, and then we can use to run our tests. So it's not the same old traditional writing test cases anymore. By the way, later on you can automate this. This is an input to automation. But for now, it's just a matter of figuring out what ideas you will be testing and prioritizing them. So this is an example of test charters. I need you to use the post-its again. A test charter is a simple template of exploring the target, the Facebook status box, with maybe the persona or the scenario that you guys have there, and the risk as well. And then discovering certain information, like not able to post. Usually the risk is a good input to discover blah, blah, blah. Like to discover issues where privacy is not properly set. Or maybe to discover issues on security or access. So one example here is exploring input fields with JavaScript and SQL injection attacks to discover security vulnerabilities. Or explore pages requiring login with spoof URLs and post to discover if users can gain access to content they did not purchase. This is the most important part. This is secondary. This one is optional. Usually what you wanted to do is put up a target and then maybe come up with a motivation on what to look for. Any questions around this? I'm sure you'll have more questions once you start the activity, but for now, try out with this template first. Again, look at your scenarios, look at your personas, rather, look at your maps, and look at your risk. And then try to come up with a test charter that gives you an idea what to test within like 30 minutes to 2 hours. We're not going to do that, but that's the idea. Questions? Okay, let's start the 5 minutes now. Yes.
Hello everyone. We are from which group? We have a great name for our group. Actually, our persona is we call it Alay in Indonesia. Alay is an extraordinary teenager, so he has an extraordinary behavior. So actually, they usually share random things, share mostly pictures, herself, pictures. We define it as a female. Checking in every place and have unstable emotions, so they usually post some things randomly. So actually we define the Facebook status post. This is our mind map. So we define it. The first one is the platform. We define the platform as we have mobile device, desktop browser, and mobile browsers, and we are focusing on the mobile devices because some of the Alay people usually using device with minimum specifications, minimum specification of the device. So we need to check whether the Facebook post is works in device in minimum spec or in the minimum versions or lowest resolutions of the screen. Desktop browsers not become our priority because not in Alay persona, but in mobile browsers because Alay people try to become hits, so they use every apps. So they have multiple browsers in their mobile devices. So we need to check whether the Facebook post is working in multiple browsers in mobile device. And about the connections, this is the interesting thing. Alay users usually don't have enough mobile credits, so maybe when do the posting, whether the pulsa is up to limit, whether this is post or not. And about the connections, they have unstable connections because they're usually moving from every place. So we need to check whether people movement will affect the Facebook post. The people movement and the data itself we define as an internal data or external data. External data comes from the devices, whether we have locations based, the recording, the photo. We need to check whether the size of the images of the post will be works on FB or not, and the location based, whether the location based, if the location based is turned off, what's the effect of the Facebook post, and the internal data. This is comes from, oh maybe I put wrong. This is the internal data. I mean for the Facebook interface itself, we have sound, we have image, and also the text. We need to explore whether the text field works because Alay usually using the extraordinary words. They have numbers combining with the letters. Is it still post or not? And about the sound, they usually recording something, random things. We need to check whether the size or the formats will be still posted perfectly in Facebook. So that's all from us to discover Alay. Thank you so much.
Thanks for sharing that. Is Alay an actual name? No? No?
It's a grouping. It's like grouping of people.
Friends.
Yeah, leveling. Stereotypes.
Okay, now I'm learning a lot of I just you know what, I recently learned what tongsis was.
Selfie stick.
Yeah, the selfie stick. Anyway, and apparently it was here, invented here. I don't know. Anyway, so thanks for sharing that. We'll just wrap up quickly. What we did here is to come up with a lot of tests within a time box. And then what you can do moving forward is to maybe put that on a one-page test plan if it's needed. If it's not, don't do it. And then you can use thread-based test management, which is just your mind map without putting that on a different tool itself, and then write down your test and maybe flag it there, whether you've completed the test or not by marking it. So rather than putting that in a separate documentation, you can just put that on the wall and then mark them, okay, we've tested this, and that. So it's becoming a bit more lean. And then you can recruit users, like what we did for PopSlide. We recruited some people to come in with devices that we don't have. Or you can recruit users that could potentially run your test without the bias that you guys would have. Maybe it doesn't have to be from the outside of the company. You can just invite someone from within the company. I'm not going to tell the story, so we can skip. Testing is the last phase. So we're not going to do that now because we don't want to, we don't want Facebook to benefit from a lot of different ideas from here. But anyway, the next step is going to be testing. It's where you do exploratory testing within a session. So it's called session-based test management. You can just simply look it up. I'll put that as a link in the slide share as well. Session-based test management is where you take one of those post-its, your test charters, and just run that for 30 minutes, and then go back and talk to the team about what you found. So we do that periodically just so we could have a session where everyone shares the information, what they found. We usually just focus on one test every 30-minute time block. You can do 1 hour as well, or 2 hours, or you can do not a synchronized time box. It's up to you. And then at this stage, the briefing is where you talk about what happened on the test. One problem with exploratory testing is that other people don't trust what you did simply because it's not visible. So what you can do is, okay, I've done my exploratory testing, let's do a debrief session. And then I stand with them, I talk to them about this is what I found, this is what I explored. Or do you have like any other inputs for that? Or can you share me your test as well? So you're brainstorming the test results rather than trying to document that beforehand. Continue using heuristics, by the way. This is another exercise we could be doing if we have more time, which is exploring and testing. Alright, so you guys are aware about exploratory testing, yes? Where you don't have the lengthy scripts. I mean, developers do exploratory testing a lot. You just don't realize you're doing that. You're actually thinking out of the box where, aside from what I coded, could there be any other instances it could fail? Good developers do that. I hope you are good developers. So I'll show you a video why the old test cases mindset won't work anymore. And this is, this is an awareness test. I'd like you to answer what it's asking us for. Okay?
This is an awareness test. How many passes does the team in white make?
How many passes?
12.
13, 12? I'll give a prize. One water bottle. 13, 14? Anyone who knows about this video? I think so, because you were looking at me. Sorry, just look at the answer now.
The answer is 13.
13.
But did you see the moonwalking bear?
You saw it? 2, 3. Oh, that's good. You saw it. So it's easy to miss what you're not looking for. And one reason why you want to do exploratory testing, why it's purposely vague for you to come up with just a scope and then explore around the scope just looking for specific information, so you don't get what we call inattentional bias. So inattentional bias is because you have a test case, for example, that you're looking onto, or like a spec that you always refer to, you don't get to think what could potentially be wrong. You don't think outside of that box, or you don't think beyond that box. So we go beyond that validation mindset to become more risk-based. And what you did today is also what we call risk-based testing. It's flipping the testing mindset around from validation to exploration. Sorry, I don't have any much more fancier fries, so if anyone wants to take the water, it's here. Alright, so wrapping up, here are some tips for you to use this. Interrogate the goals and risks deeply, like what we did earlier. Ask your CEOs or CMOs or whoever. Make everything visual, like what we did. Time box everything, by the way. Get a strong facilitator as well, because you won't be able to agree together if there's not one person who sort of facilitates the conversation, like the time box as well. Involve the whole team and then focus your time box. I'd like, at this point, I'm not gonna, maybe, let's probably spend 1 minute. For your companies, what could be the use case of this process? Sorry?
Many things.
Many things?
Yeah.
Okay.
To help product team understand the risks that may occur
Exactly.
if we don't deliver quality.
Yep. That's one way to encourage product to understand that testing is not that easy. It's one way to socialize testing as well within the company. That's good. Anyone else? Use case for you? Yeah.
There is some cases that only have that usually happen in production, but is it hard to reproduce in the staging environment?
That's correct. Okay, so what could you do there? So you're saying we need to motivate people to come up with a better staging environment, or?
In my current company, we usually also test in production first before we release to.
Okay, that's good. So you're saying that we need to be checking production as well? Yeah. Any other use case? How can you use this with user stories? You don't have to spend as much time as we did today with that. What you can do is maybe take a user story, have a story kick off with your developer, or with your product guy, or with your BA, and then just stand up for 10 minutes, talk about what are the areas we need to be testing, what are the potential risks. What did you use the persona for? What do you guys think? Why the persona is there?
Right, view from the user perspective.
Exactly. So you're trying to anchor your test on the user's standpoint. This is customer-centric testing, among other things. The reason why you have that persona is because sometimes we testers or developers or product managers, we look at the solution itself, but not realizing that this is a solution to a problem of someone that we care about, which is our customers. And what we usually say is that if the problem is not solved, the solution doesn't work. No matter how good your architecture, your API is, no matter how good the interface is, if it doesn't work in terms of solving the problem, it's not a good solution at all. So always think about the customers. Always think about who your users are and work with your team to come up with the persona of that user. So here's a few reading list on this topic. So design sprint is what I told you about earlier. Sprint and design sprint are two different books. If you're onto Agile testing, this is a good resource. And then if you're onto BBST or black box software testing and context-driven testing, it's a good resource as well. You know what other good resources are for this? Psychology books. Psychology books, really. So that's my talk. Here's what I do, here's my contact numbers. You can just reach out to me if you have any questions. Feel free to have a discussion. Any questions? What questions do you have? We have probably around 3 minutes. Yeah?
We just talked about what specific features.
Yeah.
So let's say we have several features. How do we map this activity into our product development?
You can use multiple maps for different features. Or if those are related, you can just have one map with all those features factored in on the maps.
So we need to create the maps in every feature that we have.
Possibly, yes. But you don't have to do that, by the way. So the what I showed you earlier, it's Xmind. You can download Xmind and then start from there, map there, save as a file, share it with others, export as a PNG, and maybe just attach that to your Jira tickets or whatever tool you're using. But it's potentially going to be different for every feature. Depends on your target. If you're targeting a release, maybe you prioritize a feature. But if you're working within the sprint, maybe you can just take one user story or feature at a time and create quickly those maps. And maybe prioritize which features you put maps as well onto. Sometimes it's just a small feature, doesn't have much room to explore. Anyway. Sorry, I saw another hands raised. Yeah.
So, what do you think is the best time to do this? Like after the user story, before the development, during the development, after the development?
Maybe like 3 months before you do any coding. No, just kidding. As long as you do it before any coding starts. You know why? Because why do we have bugs? It's not because the developers introduced them. It's because there are some things that they just didn't factor in the first place. And the best way for you to prevent the bug is to help the person creating the product think about that. And that's preventing altogether. So the best way is before you do any work, but if, for example, work is progressing, then maybe just stop and have a conversation with the developers using the maps so that you can prevent those sort of risk and bugs becoming reality. One story I have is that there was a team already creating the code. They already have the interface, the APIs, and then the testers started doing the mind maps. And then they have some questions on the mind maps. They ask the developer. They realize the developer is doing it wrong. And it was not the problem of the developer per se. It's not the fault of the developer, but just because there wasn't a clear understanding with the group on what we're trying to build. At that moment, we stopped the development. Spent 3 waste days, but at the same time, rather than release towards the end of the sprint with something that's wrong, we were able to get that information outright and mitigate the situation. Yep.
Does the tester still create the test scenario or test case instead using the map for the result to post to production?
Sorry, the result.
For the QA pass document.
Well, depends on your needs. In Agile, usually we try to minimize documentation as possible to the minimum. I'm not saying no documentation. What I usually found with the teams I coach, we don't need the test cases anymore. Some people ask, what if we're being audited by ISO or another regulator? The regulators are usually looking for just test evidence, not the test document with the templates. So in that case, you can choose to decide to create a test or not. Usually I would advise not if you can just use the charters. Because those test charters, you can put that on a sheet, like an outline, and then run through them. And that's your test evidence already. So you don't have to. Now, if you're looking at regression testing, what test can you run? Regression test doesn't need to be manual, it needs to be automated. Those are really good candidates for you to automate. Did I answer the question? Oh, okay. All good? All right, I'm being stopped by... Oh yeah, last point. If you guys, I'm writing a mini ebook about Testmob so I can share it to everyone who doesn't have this workshop. If you can go through this link, and then I just have a quick survey there on what is okay with you on this workshop and what you think needs to be improved. And then I'll ask for your email if you want me to send you a copy once that book is finished. So I'll probably have around maybe 3 weeks to a month before I complete the ebook. But I'll send it to you so you can share that with your teams. And hopefully get everyone engaged on software testing. Okay? Cool? Thanks guys. Have a great evening. Afternoon. Sorry.